Jesus prepares only the finest for us. He only wants the finest for us. The stories about Jesus feeding 5,000 people began to follow him. The people began to follow him. And people followed him just for the food. And he noticed this one time, and he said, whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes on me will never be thirsty. He said, you'll be thirsty tomorrow if you eat of this food. He said, but if you follow me, you'll never be hungry, and you'll never be thirsty. When I think of bread, and especially homemade bread, I think of going to my grandmother's house, and both of my grandmothers made homemade bread. There's a story on the back of the bulletin, similar story on the back of the bulletin. There's nothing like the aroma of homemade bread. Maybe the only thing it compete with would be the taste of homemade bread. And just permeates the whole house and permeates your whole soul. Well, Jesus wants that for us our whole life, that feeling, that aroma about us. Jesus comes today to take away our spiritual hunger, to share the pain, to forgive our sin, to help relieve us from the baggage we often carry, and to restore us to the peace we have been seeking. When I was single quite a few years ago, probably over 45 years ago, living by myself in an apartment, or I think maybe Dave and I shared an apartment, my father came to visit for a couple of days. He had a conference. He traveled quite a bit and for the church and for his business. And he stayed all night, one night in Columbus. And I noticed he didn't have any luggage with him. I said, Dad, where's your luggage at? He reached into his pocket in his sport coat and pulled out a toothbrush. That's all he had. Carefree. He said, that's all I need. He said, I found out the secret to traveling is to travel light. Never had a carefree burden in the world. Fast forward 20 years later, and I know several of you have been to the beach this year and enjoy going to the beach, and we have always enjoyed going to the beach with our family. The last 2 years we haven't been able to go with my entire family, but usually we go through this ritual of getting everyone gets all their stuff together, and I open the trunk to the car and I start loading up all the trunk, and I never can get everything in the trunk. And so I tell Kathy and the kids, I said, we got to take some stuff out. We can't fit all this in. Kathy said, oh, I can fit it in. So and she's, I don't know her, you know or not, she's an honorary member of the Green Bay Packers. She can take more stuff and pack more stuff in one drawer or closet than anyone I've ever seen. So, but anyway, the Green Bay Packers have nothing on her, so she packed the trunk full. Sure enough, we get to the airport and pull into the valet. I hit the remote to the trunk, and it wouldn't open. I said, you got to be kidding. We can't, the remote's not working. So we went out, and I said to the kid, James, I said, set on the trunk of the car, and maybe it'll release it. Free the pressure of it, and it'll release it. So we tried that, and then we reversed it. I tried setting on the trunk, started pounding on the trunk, tried to leverage it, and nothing worked. In fact, the security man come over, said, what's going on over here? I said, we can't get in the truck, and our plane leaves in 15 minutes. That was before all the security. So went through that routine, and I felt totally out of control. I mean, felt totally out of control. I said, well, we're going to have to get on the plane, leave everything behind. You know, they said, oh, we can't do this. No one. I said, well, I don't like to fly anyway. I'll just drive down. No, we can't do that either. We still can't get in the car. So anyway, James says, Dad, let me see the key. So he got the key, went around to the trunk, put the key in, the thing opened like a jack-in-the-box. I mean, it was so full, it just flew open. I think the suitcases jumped out by themselves. And so we were on our way. But it's not fun to be out of control. You know, I like to be in control. I admit I like to be in control. It's a great temptation of mine. I want to control things. That's part of my personality, I think. I like to plan things in my career, and I've usually been involved in leading and at work and at church, different things, and in the family. So I've always enjoyed planning, organizing, being in control, and I know we have other people like this too. And I thought I was in control at that time, but I wasn't. And several times in my life I've thought I was in control, and certain things happen health-wise. I realized I wasn't in control. Paradoxically, a lot of times what we think are our strengths are our weaknesses. What we think of as our strengths are our weaknesses. And as we grow older, we realize, I was just talking to Ron this morning, as we get older, we realize we're less and less in control, especially our physical lives. We're less and less in control. We were down to visit my mother last week, and it's difficult. I can see how difficult it is. She's 91, and the doctor keeps telling me I'm fit as a fiddle, but I can't do anything. But she realized it's tough to be out of control, and it's very difficult for her. It's difficult even to watch her be like that. But I think sometimes why does this have to happen? Why does this happen? I'm not sure, but it might be God's way of saying you need to totally surrender to me. Totally surrender. After Jesus was baptized, and he went into the desert for prayer and fasting for 40 days. During that time, he was tempted. One of his temptations was to turn the stones into bread. One of the temptations was to turn the stone into bread. He was hungry. He was tempted. He saw the stones, and he's probably out in the desert. He probably saw the stones. It looked like bread. So he faced the temptation of turning, and he knew he had the power to do that, but he never. Another temptation was the power. He had the power to do anything he wanted. He was given the power to do anything he wanted, but he refused and did his Father's will. He could have seized that power and control over all the people and the kingdoms of the world. He could have built himself a large estate with large palaces, many servants, fine food, and a life of luxury, but he didn't. He could have removed himself from the people and the problems of others, but he didn't. Even though he had the power to do so, he used his power very sparingly. He surrendered himself and his life to the will of God. He did not come as a king or a dictator or a ruler. He came as a servant. Basically, he lived on the streets with the common people. When the disciples argued with each other who was the greatest, Jesus says the greatest is the least and the servant of all. Jesus defined the role of a leader as a servant leader. He led by example. He taught the disciples, he trained them, he mentored them, and he empowered them. He did not baptize anyone. Did you realize that? I never realized that till recently. Jesus never baptized anyone. He let the disciples, that was part of empowering him, he let the disciples do the baptizing. He sent out the 70, and they did the things that Jesus did. They healed people, did the same thing. So he taught them, he trained them, he delegated to them, and he empowered them. And he said, greater things you shall do than I have done. He was the greatest leader of all time because he had the second part. He was a true servant. I think today, one of the greatest temptations of each of us, of the leaders in the world, leaders in business, governments and institutions, and even the churches, is that leader, the control and the power. Sometimes we allow that to go to our head, and we don't think of what's best for the people, especially the common people, which is a bad mistake. I've mentioned it before. One of my favorite TV shows is called The Undercover Boss. Anyone watch that show and like that show? It usually kind of has a common theme. It's where where they take a president or a CFO of a company, a large company with many different stores, many different locations, and this person goes in disguise as a common person, maybe a new hire or someone in training. They usually go to a warehouse. Sometimes they wait on people, but they disguise themselves as a new person. They don't know what they're doing, and usually they don't know what they're doing. The ironic thing is the president hardly knows what they're doing when they get as far as common jobs or common people, because they've lived in those estates, those palaces. They're far away from most of the people on the basic level of the corporation. But what they find out when they go work with these people, it's a totally different story. It's a totally different story. They find out there's many things that the workers do not know. They haven't been trained. And they also find out that what's most touching, they found out that the common people have a lot of challenges and problems, just meeting their budget. Health-wise, there's a lot of, with health, and just what problems common, ordinary people have that a lot of people in those positions are not aware of. So in the end, it find out most of the people that at least the ones they show on TV, are touched. They realize that they didn't know really what's going on in their company with their people, and they change. Their heart changes. They do things to help the people, and they change the company. And paradoxically, the changes they make also help the company. In the story of the lady at the well, Jesus placed himself directly in the path of somebody who was lost. As the disciples were traveling through Samaria, and Samaria was a place that the Jewish people did not normally go. Jesus was at the heart of Samaria at Jacob's well. He was tired and hungry, so he stopped at the well and asked a lady that was there. It was noontime when only the women went to the well. It was noontime. He asked her for a drink of water. She thought it was very unusual for a Jew to be with her, a Samaritan, in the middle of the day at all, or even in the middle of the day. And she even told Jesus, "You don't even have a pitcher. You don't even have anything to carry the water." And Jesus said, if you knew who I am, he said, you would ask me for living water. If you drank the living water, you'd never be thirsty again. He knew this lady's life had spun out of control. She had a lot of baggage which was wearing on her. She had been married 5 times, was not married to the man she was living with. I guess you could say she was looking for love in the wrong places. But Jesus was continually criticized by the Pharisees. He knew what it was like to be rejected. He knew what it was like to be looked down upon. They were jealous of his power and his influence, and they put him in a box. They literally wanted to put him away, which they eventually did. But Jesus knew what it was like to live in the boxes. And he knew this lady probably faced a lot of criticism. She was probably in 4 or 5 different boxes. She was a Samaritan, which Jewish people looked down on. She was a woman in a man's society, dominated by men. And she'd been married 5 times, and she was living with the person. So she was placed in a lot of boxes by a lot of people, and probably faced a lot of prejudice. It does not feel good. I know what it feels like, and I'm sure you do too, to face people who are prejudiced against you for one reason or the other. I think we've all had that feeling, and it's not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling to feel like you're judged. And then it's even worse when you feel like you're unfairly judged. It's painful and it hurts. And Jesus knew how he felt when we judge others ourselves, and I'm guilty as anybody else of judging others. Who is really in that box? I'm going to ask you a question. Who's in the box when we judge others? We are. We're in that box, aren't we? When we don't accept others for whatever reason. We have a lot of division in our country now, and you got people on both ends, politically, racially, just all kind of problems that we have with people. And you turn on the TV, you'll see one angle, and there you don't really know who to believe. You really don't know what to believe or who to believe anymore, and people are angry. And I turn it on for a while, and I'm going to believe Jesus. I'm going to follow Jesus. And so, but it's tough to face all this prejudice and this hurt. And Jesus felt boxed up by the Pharisees, but even more important, that time he knew the lady felt boxed up, and so he freed her, and she believed him. Just last week, I had an experience with Bernie. Bernie called me up about a week and a half ago and said he had a friend that was in a undergoing rehab in a facility close to where I live. He asked me if I could go with him to visit that person. And I didn't know the person Bernie was talking about, but I said, okay, we'll meet over there. He said, we'll meet over there. So we did. We visited his friend I found out in the course of our discussion, found out Bernie and he had been friends for probably almost 70 years. Bernie came up to Columbus from southern Ohio, and his friend had come from West Virginia. They struck up a relationship and were really good friends for 70 years. In fact, his daughter was there with him, and Bernie said, I used to babysit for her when she was born, 6 months old. Bernie has 4 daughters, and she said, yeah, Bernie and Mother, we used to play together. We were very good friends and still are good friends. And I noticed that his daughter was going around and she's talking to us, and I noticed taking care of her dad's needs, even taking care of Bernie's needs, patting him on the shoulder, called him Bernard, which if people that's known Bernie for a long time call him Bernard, right, Connie? So she's calling him Bernard. And I found out that she'd mentioned that she was a nurse. She'd changed her career in the middle of her life and was a nurse. Didn't find out too much more about her then, but I noticed she was very observant to her father's needs and Bernie's needs and taking care of them, patting Bernie on the shoulder. As we got out, she let us out. She escorted us out, and I said, Bernie, she really likes you. And he said, yeah, he said, I've known her all her life. And he said, I used to babysit for her, and she told me I was the only man that ever treated her right. And Bernie, I just mentioned Bernie, I asked him if it's okay to tell the story. Yeah. He said, I said, that says a lot about you, Bernie. He said, yeah, it says a lot about me, and it says a lot else about the men in her life, other men. But, and I forgot to mention, before we left, she offered a prayer. Before we left, I was asking myself, should I offer a prayer, which I normally ask people to like a prayer before I leave. Before I did, she offered to ask a prayer, and it was a beautiful prayer from the heart, and I could just tell from that prayer that she knew Jesus. But hearing the story was a heartbreaking story that she had to go through. So I thought, she might have had a lady at the well experience. She might have had an experience like that. The lady at the well recognized Jesus as the Messiah. He touched her heart. She accepted him with all her heart, and she could not wait to tell her friends. She drank of the living water, and she shared it. I think people probably noticed how changed she was, how much of a changed person she was. And so many people believe, the scriptures say many people believe because of this woman's testimony and her sharing. She felt empowered by Jesus like never before. She was free from the baggage she had been carrying for a long time. She was a new person. When Jesus was asked, what are the greatest commandments? What is the greatest commandment? Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. He tied the two together. He said, people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. It's just not honoring, worshiping God, worshiping Jesus. It's the heart, worshiping with the heart. He said, and the second commandment, to me at least, is difficult. Love your neighbor as yourself. It's a challenge for me, and I'm sure others, to love others who are very different from me. God created everyone. He loves all of his children, and he made it very apparent through Jesus that he is very concerned about those in pain and suffering and those who suffer from the prejudice of others. A few weeks ago, on Wednesday evening, Kathy challenged us, said, when we look at others, do you see Jesus when you look in the face of others? Something to that effect. I forget the question, but do you see Jesus when you look in the face of the others? If we can see the face of Jesus in others, we will see it with new eyes and have a new heart. And just like when I was trying to get in the trunk of the car, I didn't realize the key was the key to get in, wasn't getting into the trunk. I forgot to use the key. Sometimes I think we forget to use the key. Jesus is the key. Jesus is the key. When we totally surrender our hearts, the controls we have to God, and love others without reservation or prejudice, we lift ourselves up out of the box and taste that living bread and living water. Thank you.